I'm Farhan Dalla, transformational trainer, and welcome to Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast, an invitation to take the journey towards your deepest self. It is my intention to inspire you to connect, move, and meditate. We'll tap in, tune in, and dive in, and together learn and reflect from authentic, real, and transformative conversations. Let's get started. Today, we are talking meditation and grief relief. I have a very special guest here today that I cannot say enough about, but I will start with the following. Her name is Farzana Jaffer Jarraj, and she is absolutely, without a doubt, an example of someone who is helping to elevate our world, including mine. She is a 3-time best-selling author. She has studied, and this is just some of the topics, but I'll mention these: psychology, communication, cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, hypnotherapy, just to name a few. She has been mentored by Tony Robbins and Joseph McClendon III. She has 24 years of experience as a motivational speaker, and that includes speaking at TED Talks. She is a coach that helps people with shifting their mindset, among other things, a teacher of courses on meditation, the author of the book, I Cheat at Meditation, and most recently, she co-authored a book called Pursuit 365 with 365 Canadian women, which was released this past International Women's Day. All incredible accomplishments, but wait, there is more. Just yesterday, she was voted one of top 30 world's best motivational speakers during addiction recovery. I want to add one more to the list of credentials, and that is that you are my friend somewhere in those lists of amazing things. You are a soul friend, a sister, someone who, like I said, elevates my life in many ways. And you've been an incredible support system for me during my grief journey and continue to do so. And so when I thought about the topic of meditation, I was not only drawing on this topic from my own personal experience that I had with you, but also because of the expert that you are in this topic. And so welcome to my podcast, Farzana Jaffer Jarraj. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I feel like shortly before you and I met, I think you and I met I think we met in 99, late 99. I think you still had your TV show then, right?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. It was shot in 97, 98. So
Yeah,
no,
probably.
99. I think it was shot in 99. You're right.
Yeah. So you
Around
still
that
had your
time.
show then. And I remember I had like in 97 was when I had started working with Tony Robbins and Joseph McClendon. And yeah, I remember, yeah, and they had kind of like encouraged me into the modeling world, and that's why I remember being there, and we met, and it was like we were just like instant, right?
Yes.
Like I don't think that there was much of a moment when we weren't just like, okay, we're friends, that's it.
And you're one
I'm
of the
you.
few, one of the few people I'd say that there's no masks when we meet. It's like, this is who we are.
Yeah.
There's a comfort that I feel with you, and I hope that that's mutual as well.
Totally.
So the topic is meditation and grief relief. And I wanted to kick off today by diving in and asking you, how is grief showing up for you, Farzana, at this time?
Okay, it's such a loaded question. So first, let's just talk about what grief is. Right? I think that grief comes in many different forms. I think most of us think of grief as the thing that happens when we lose a person, right? Or we lose something precious to us, right? Um, but I don't think people realize that we have micro griefs, like we have micro grievances that build up. And I actually think that grief and loneliness are like very, very intertwined. I actually don't think you can feel lonely without having a bunch of grieving to do. So I believe that when people don't actually process the negative emotions from the challenges that they have on a daily basis, that like, so yeah, like big grief and like daily little grief, like let's say that for some reason we couldn't make this call today, there would be a small amount of grief over it, right? We'd be sad about it, but we probably have in our heads the psychology of like, ah, can't be upset about it. There's too many things to do. Have to keep going. It'll be fine, But we'd be sad about it, right? Let's say
Mhm.
like all the people who had planned vacations or weddings or things in the past year of this pandemic, and everything's changed, or like you can't go to the concert. I mean, even before the pandemic we would make plans, and if the plans fell through we would have upsets, or it's the reason that there are change management issues, right? Like in the
Mhm.
world, is that people make plans even on a team of goals and for their visions, and they set these things up, and of course life never takes you on a straight path. It's like it's here, it's there, it's like all over the place, and things don't happen the way we plan. And I mean, it's just like you set an expectation, and if it doesn't go the way you want it, positively or negatively, there can be more grieving. Of course, if it doesn't go the way you want in a negative way, even more grief, right? As opposed to like different scenarios of setting up expectation and being pleasantly surprised, or and that whole model of expectation and whatnot. And so I think that in the last year, people, I feel like the world, when we went into a worldwide lockdown, every single person in the world was forced out of their daily routines. And there's something to be said for daily routines, setting up your dopamine levels in the morning, setting up a feeling of success, a feeling of regularity, of consistency, of putting your clothes on. And even if they aren't your value based close friends, the people that you see on a day to day basis at the gym or at your cafe, or when you get your bulletproof coffee, because I know you love those, um, those things that we do in our day that make us feel like this is who I am, all of those were taken away, right? And now everyone was stuck at home. People stopped wearing pants, they stopped getting out of bed, right? And all of a sudden we're sitting there, and all these emotions that we didn't process before because we were too busy, and because we would tell ourselves, don't feel that way, don't think that way, suck it up, be
Suppress
tougher,
it.
you're tougher than this. Or even like when you do lose someone close to you, even if you knew it was coming, there's a voice in your head that says, well, you knew this was coming, why are you so upset about it? It's time to move on. Or people will tell you, no, it's time to live your life. Or people throw like these statements at you. And last year, I believe that when the pandemic happened, not everybody has been equipped to deal with negative emotions, to sit with them and process them. Because I always say emotions aren't fluffy things, they are neurochemicals. And if you don't deal with them, and when I say deal with them, meaning give them the attention that they deserve, you don't feel them out of yourself,
Mhm.
right? They get stuck in your shoulders, in your gut, in your back, they hold in your tissues in your body. So, what happened last year is every single person was forced into a type of meditation I call Vipassana, which is just where you're stuck sitting and listening and observing whatever comes up constantly. And it was a
Yeah.
worldwide Vipassana, and people were freaking out because it was too many different kinds of emotions all at once, all your insecurities, all your stuff. And you don't have the events of like the recency of events to associate with certain emotions. So it's just all of them at once. And I think that's why people went into grief, into depression, into anxiety, which is anxiety,
Eating.
right? And I think that, that's why sadly we had, so many suicides
Mhm.
in the last year. It's been horrible. And I think that grief is one of these things that it actually separates us from each other, and it creates an isolation and a loneliness, and it becomes very hard to be around other people, especially if you're like you and I are and we're empaths and we don't want to share that negative side of emotion with other people because we're supposed to be positive all the time, or we're supposed to
Right.
be on
We're
all
the
the time
ones that are seen as the strong ones.
as
And
the strong ones. And it's
yeah.
like, this, I think the best thing that could have happened in the last year is that the world was given permission to say, I'm not okay.
Mhm.
Not, oh, how are you today? I'm good, And it was like that worldwide. And you and I have always been just honest with each other like that. But I feel like, and we've been lucky to have that with each other, with people like Anar, like not, I throw her name in here too, but
She's a mutual friend of ours.
yeah. Um, I think was it her who introduced us? No, it was some other people. Not the first time, but yeah, family.
Right.
We
Yes.
have a good soul family, yes.
That's
But I
true.
feel I feel like this idea for me, this grieving, it's so many things, right? Like I see women grieving their bodies after pregnancy. I see people who just can't do what they used to do when they were in their 20s, and they're in their 40s or 50s now, and they can't do, or even more so with my parents, and like the fact
Mhm.
that they're like, okay, what's happening to our lives now? Can we travel? Can we retire? Can we do these things? Like, like what's
Yeah.
happening to my memory? Like there's so many things that happen with grief. And for myself right now, I'm seeing that as the world has picked back up in pace again, that I require space to grieve on a daily basis. And I actually truly believe that meditation, even though we don't call it grieving, I think a lot of meditation isn't just about bliss. Everyone thinks that meditation is about this bliss and peace of mind. If you lived in a mountain isolated from people, maybe you wouldn't have stimulation, and you could potentially, if you meditated every single day, have zero thought. You
Right.
know, you know, meditation isn't about the cessation of awareness. It's about the
The
enhancement
the
of awareness,
enhancement of the awareness. Yes.
right? And so if you become aware of your own experience with to such a degree of loving, supportive observation and acknowledgement, then it's not about not having thoughts. It's not about no longer having any negative emotions. It's about the ability to sit with them. And I think that that is much harder. And I think that's the reason that people don't like meditation, because the moment they sit down, their body, their brain, their nervous system, their soul, their essence, their heart goes, hey, thanks so much for listening. I
Right.
have all these things that I want to say to you. And I've been upset about this, and I've been upset about that. And, we're
Mm.
feeling like really neglected about this, this, and this. And it's like, boom, it's like all of that comes in, and it's overwhelming, and people don't want to deal with it. It's too
Right.
much all at once. And so I actually think that meditation, and for me, you asked the question is what's happening for me with meditation, with grieving, when it comes to that, is that now that the world has picked back up again, I find it very difficult to prioritize myself and to make these commitments to have time for myself. And really, the only time I do that is when I meditate. And so there's all this stuff that's coming up, and I've lost so many friends this past year. Even, I mean, the loss of, your mom, even like really,
Yeah.
even our friend lost her father, and I had some friends take their own lives, and I had friends die of prostate cancer and colon cancer, and just so many things. Like there's so many things that are the big form, like I say, call them big griefs, but
Right.
there's so many little ones.
That
Yeah.
was certainly a loaded question, and you gave me a very insightful answer and a very um, there was a lot there to unpack. But I do want to say that I'm grateful for COVID in a way because it was an opportunity for us to go home so that we could go home. And by that, I mean it was an opportunity to go within ourselves and be present to those thoughts. And you had a choice in those moments to be present and sit in that space of that. voice that's been trying to get your attention, or you could medicate, suppress, eat, go to the pantry, fall apart. And it's been challenging, but I'm fortunate enough that I have people like you and others who have supported me by helping to stay and sit in the space of discomfort with me. But I also had to have moments where I did that on my own. It was so hard to come home every day to a place that was once filled with the sounds of my mom. And then it was just silent. There was no voice to greet me when I walked through the door. There was no TV on with Bollywood movies and television shows. There was no one cooking in the kitchen. There was no sense that would remind me of her presence and existence. No one to greet me on the door, because she always did, to say, welcome home. And I would leave the TV on every time I left so that when I would come to the door, I would at least be met with a sound that would distract me from the silence and the discomfort. And like you said, the loneliness that it created for me. And then I finally decided that I was going to face that silence. And one day I decided not to leave the TV on and not to have anything on, so that when I stepped in the door, I was met with the silence. And so the day came and I approached the door coming back home. And as soon as I got to the door, I didn't hear anything and the discomfort set in. And so I took about 5 or 6 deep breaths and I walked in the door. And instead of running to the TV or getting a glass of water or distracting that discomfort, I chose to stay in it. And what happened was is that I just decided to break down my entry into steps. So take my jacket off, hang it up, take my shoes off, put them in the closet. And then I walked to a chair and I sat and I stayed in the silence. And what I noticed was that after some time, that discomfort just started to dissipate a little bit. And I stayed in it. And then eventually, it was like the discomfort just sort of melted away. But what I noticed also was that I felt this incredible presence. I felt the presence of my mom. I felt the presence of my late dad. I felt the presence of my guides, my angels, and everything that was waiting for me on the other side of that discomfort was all of a sudden there. And I just allowed myself to be filled with that presence. And I knew in that moment that I wasn't alone, that I never have been alone, that I never will be alone. And it took for me to be able to face that discomfort, to be willing to sit in there, to see what was available to me that was always present for me. And yes, there are times where I still feel that loneliness. I'm human, it happens. But at the same time, having experienced that, I now know what else is available to me. And that's been an incredible process for me during this time.
Can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
The loneliness that you sometimes feel, though, I feel I I don't know, something is telling me that that was present before your mom and dad passed.
Yes, as you know, I was a caregiver to my mom. I was a caregiver to my dad and also to my grandmother before that. And caregiving, I want to say first and foremost, is probably one of the most rewarding things that you could ever do. It is, there's so many blessings. I say, if you've been given the opportunity to be a caregiver, to step into it fully, because you will learn so much about yourself, your capacity to love, your capacity to give. Um, and it does come with its challenges and many sacrifices,
Mhm.
incredible sacrifices. Your social structure, the way that you map out your day is all around the person that you're caring for. And so it's difficult to have even a social life or some form of connection. And I think you can relate to a lot of what I'm talking about, being a caregiver yourself. There was a lot of loneliness in that process as well. Um, yeah, and I think that as a caregiver, you don't really talk about that loneliness. You don't talk a lot about yourself because your entire world is your loved one. And everyone knows that, who follows me on social media or knows me personally, that I was extremely devoted to my mother, wholeheartedly, 110% with all of me. And I put my, I don't want to say put my life aside, because that's what it looks like, because this was also an opportunity for me and for my growth. But I did feel a lack of connection for me personally through that. And that did create a lot of loneliness. So, yes, the loneliness did, to answer your question, begin prior to that, prior to the transitioning of my mom. I do want to ask you, speaking of transition, I do want to ask you about your experience with meditation. And this particular part just amazes me. And that is that you've been meditating since the age of 3. How did you get introduced to meditation at the age of 3? What was that experience like?
Have we actually ever talked about it formally? I can't remember.
We did touch upon it. Yes, we did. But I want our listeners to
Yeah,
know the
yeah, no.
story.
I'm like, I can't remember. Okay. So we come from a community that carries a Sufi tradition. Okay. Sufism is the mystical side of Islam. And there is a 4 a.m. meditation practice that is available to people, but they don't, within our specific community, but most people don't go. It's a very select group of people who go for this practice. I mean, for a number of reasons. People think it's hard. It is also hard for a lot of people to be up and in a prayer hall at 4 in the morning. But our community has these time, like once or twice a year or 3 times a year, I think. They have a students week, and in the students week they kind of introduce all the children to the ceremonies and have the children officiate and do everything. And so it was a students week. It was like back in the early 80s, and early 80s. And my mom just decided to take me, and she took me for this thing, and she didn't there was no instruction, there was no anything. And it was just, I just remember waking up that morning, and I'd never woken up that early. Like, I mean, what, like my bedtime was like 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock or
So
something.
now your mom is waking you up at what, 2:30, 3 o'clock to go to the practice?
I think it was like 3 a.m. and it's just pitch black out. And it's just a very different feeling going to sleep late at night at 3 a.m. versus getting up at 3 a.m. And everything is so quiet. And like, while you're kind of tired because your brain waves are stuck still in that theta brainwave level, there's also this like sharpness of like every thought is like crisp and acute. Every sound is so loud. And I had this like kind of this hair raising feeling on the back of my neck, like something really important was going to happen. And it just felt like, I mean, my mom gave me chai for the first time. And that was like a sacred moment, because it was like, a little kid, you're not allowed to have chai. It was like a grown up moment. And I was like, oh, I have to get to have chai now. Um, and so I remember that was like an epic moment for me. And then But I also remember as we were driving to the prayer hall, like, I just remember that we were like, it was like we were on the surface of the ocean and the water was so like silk and we were making ripples, and every here and there I could sense that there was a little ripple of like someone awake here or there, but I had this sense that everyone was beneath it and they were in their dreams. And I could sense all these people sleeping. And when we got to the mosque and went in, there was like a little bit more chai. And then we go into the hall and it's like pitch black in there, except for the exit signs, just a little light from the exit signs. And my mom sat down and she gave me prayer beads and she just said, just say this mantra over and over again. And I was just like, there was something inside me that had like a big no. I was like, that's not right. I just felt like, no, she's not right. She's incorrect. And so I just put the beads down and I sat there and I asked God or the universe, like when I was that age, I would say God, right? But I asked and I said, what am I supposed to do? And in my mind, there was like from my head, like as though this was where my consciousness was residing. There was like a corridor and it narrowed and opened up into the expanse of the infinite universe. And in that corridor, every little thought that generated from even at 2.5, 3 years old, you still have some psychology, right? Habits, mannerisms, language, all these things that you've picked up from your family. And every little thought came through and paused in the narrow part of the corridor. And I had this little moment at that age where I was like, well, what am I going to do about this? I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to be nice about it. I'm going to forgive. I'm going to let go. And then I was like, but the rest I can't do anything about it. So I just let it go and I let the universe take it. And I mean, I was 3, so I didn't have that many thoughts. And eventually all the thoughts were gone. There were no more thoughts to move from me and to release or to process or acknowledge. And the corridor dissolved away. And it was me and this just vast expanse of nothing. And it wasn't like white light or anything. It was just black, but it didn't feel empty. And I
Mm.
don't know where time and space was in that. All I know is that I got this sense to look up after quite some time. And when I looked up, whether it's real or a hallucination or the imagination of a child is irrelevant. What matters is what I made of it in that moment and how it affected me. I had I perceived these what I saw were just like balls of light. And as a child, I was like, oh, those are angels. And it just seemed like some of them were attached to people and some of them were just there. And I was like, oh, those are there. And it just felt like they were rejoicing or celebrating. And it was, but even in the silence, even in that stillness where I sat, there was just the sense of myself and the sense of the universe and the sense of just oneness and connectedness. And it was so beautiful and so powerful that I was like, I'm doing this every day, like forever. This is happening every day for the rest of my life. And, if I hadn't had that, I don't know how I would have gotten through my entire childhood of bullying, of just being shunned constantly. Like there are so many traumas that I've been through in my life, and meditation was literally my first self-help tool. It was the first gift that
Amazing.
was given to me.
Yeah, amazing. I
The
love
space.
that. And you've not just used that as a tool in your life, but you've shared that tool and have become a meditation teacher. And I I want to share with our listeners an experience that I had with you last November when my mom had just transitioned and I was going through some pretty deep stuff, and it was really late one night. I could not sleep and I was struggling, and I think it was just shy of a couple of weeks since my mom had transitioned, and I called you and I said, I need help. I can't sleep. I'm struggling. And so you took me through a guided meditation as I laid on my bed and I listened to your voice. And you stayed with me until I came really close to falling asleep. And I don't remember how long it was, but I do know that you helped me incredibly that night. And I am so grateful that I have a friend like you who would just hold space for me, but, utilizing your tools and share them with me to help me through that very difficult time. And so, for people that are listening right now, how can they use meditation to help them? Where can they get started? How do they get started? If they're, whether they've meditated or not, they're going through grief, whether it's a micro grief or something as major as I have gone through.
Yeah.
What do you recommend?
It's not about stopping the thoughts or emotions. Okay. It's about sitting with them. It's about listening. So think about all the thoughts and emotions that come up as being the expressions of a child. Like, if you think about it, I believe that the part of you that is your consciousness is infinite. And I believe the part of you that acquires beliefs and values and ideas in this life is like a child. It's stuck in a linear existence. It's contained. And when you sit to meditate, you are listening to a child, and you need to listen to that child cry, get upset, whatever it needs to do. And you have to sit there and hold space for it. And I would say that the very first step of meditation is not about calmness. It's not about stillness. It's not about the cessation of thoughts. That will come eventually. It really will. Like, you will start to have those moments. But the sooner that you just listen, right? Think about it. If in a conversation, if I kept cutting you off again and again and again because I think I know what you have to say, or I'm like, just don't feel that way. Don't think that way. Why don't you we'll just do it like this instead? And if I kept doing that and you were trying to emotionally express to me, you would get so frustrated. It would be so frustrating. And yet that's what people do to themselves. So if you have never meditated, if you are dealing with grief, first of all, set up to start with 1 minute. Okay. 1 minute only. Okay. And for that minute, you will fully be dedicated to listening, to being in awareness of, to being present for whatever happens. It doesn't matter what the content of the thoughts are. It doesn't matter what the content or the quality of the emotion is. What matters is that you are a loving, respectful listener to yourself. And start with 1 minute. It can be hard to listen to a person for 1 minute. I mean, people are complaining about TikTok going to 3 minutes right now from 1 minute. And they're like, these TikTok videos are taking too long now. I can't
Right.
watch as many. You know? And it's like, I mean, our attention span for 1 minute, like, we need to train ourselves to be better listeners of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that is the first thing that I would say. Start with a minute, because if the grief is there, it can be really overwhelming. You know this. I know this. We know,
Absolutely.
right? And people who have grieved in their lives, which is pretty much everyone, if you're probably watching this or have gotten to this point of being alive still, you will have had to have dealt with something, and it is really tough to sit in it. Teenagers are the best at it. We get angry at them because they go to their bedrooms and lay in their bed and stare at the ceiling. But you know what? When we used to do that when we were kids, we would do that. We would feel all the emotions. They would release because the neurochemicals would get spent by our bodies, and the thoughts we would go to the worst. We'd go to the worst catastrophic possibilities, and then we go like, "Well, I'm still going to be alive. I'm still going to be okay. I'll be fine. Like, it's going to suck, but I'll figure it out." And I think you let those thoughts happen, right? You let the emotions be felt, and then you're left in this space where it's just you, it's just your consciousness again. And it's like a blank slate. And that is actually the ideal form of open mindfulness meditation. And yet it's something that most of us as adults have unlearned because we're like, don't feel that way, don't think that way. I'm tough, I'm strong, I've got this. That mantra, I've got this. Like, that's cool if you're working out, but like maybe not. Or like if you're like persevering through like a challenge, right? But maybe
Right.
not. And yeah, you do have this, but have you got this in the sense that you've got this where you're gonna sit and be with it?
Right.
Like, we used to do that really well as teenagers, and then people told us, stop daydreaming, don't wallow in it, don't this. And it wasn't wallowing, it was actually natural, healthy, innate knowing of processing.
I've made an observation through my grief journey, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but to the degree in which people were able to be present for me, people like yourself, um, it was it was dependent on their ability, I think, to be present for themselves. And I guess not from having expectations necessarily, but just the idea of just wanting someone to be present for me, just to listen, to witness, not necessarily give advice, but just be fully present. Not everyone could do that for me. Not everyone could do that. And I thought about it and I thought, well, maybe because they can't be present to themselves. They're not paying attention to those thoughts. They're not sitting and taking that 1 minute to just listen to the voice within themselves.
Like, yes, yes, yes. I truly believe that meditation is the foundation of every other relationship that you will ever have. It is the relationship with yourself. And yes, meditation can absolutely be a spiritual thing. But whatever anyone's spiritual, religious beliefs or, ascetic or like whatever your beliefs are, like you you still have you, and the relationship with yourself, if that one is not good, no other relationship in your life will be solid. Not your goals, not your visions, your goals and
Right.
your dreams, your work stuff, your family, nothing, not your romantic relationships. It has to be good with yourself first.
Mhm. So you wrote a book called I Cheat at Meditation. Why did you call it that? What is the book about?
Well, there is a chapter, just to be clear, called Why You're Not Really Cheating. There is a chapter in the book. I called it that because I think people think it's really hard. I think people think it's too hard, that it takes years to get good at, or to even get the benefits of it, and that you have to be spiritual or a yogi or wear a diaper or rename yourself some weird spiritual name. Like, like, and I just feel like, one, I like learning things. I love knowledge. I don't have days and days and days to read books and volumes and things, because I want to be of service, right? Like, my time is better spent being of service to our community, to my friends, to my family, to my people. Um, and so I wanted to write a book that was like a cheat sheet. Okay. Get the essentials, get like the essence of what you need as quickly as possible. I wanted it to be in a conversational tone. I didn't need to throw in tons of neuroscience speak and all of that other stuff. So I wanted it to be able, like, anyone, it's got illustrations, it's got things. I wanted it to be something that you could read in an evening, in a single evening, and start using it right away. And I wanted it, like, I feel like the reason that I can teach meditation is not because I'm some great guru. It's because I'm like a Sherpa. I've been doing it for like 38 years now. And after 38 years of meditating in all different kinds of meditation and all different kinds of experiences, through different kinds of experiences that I was going through in my life while I went through these meditations, I might be able to potentially have troubleshot a bunch of things or been through things, so that when I can guide someone else, there's a lot of intention in the weight of my words, as
Mhm.
opposed to, like, do you ever I had this one teacher in high school, and she would just read the chemistry textbook. Like, she would read it, but I don't think she understood it herself. And she would just, I remember like trying to learn about moles and molarity in high school. And it was just a concept that I needed to understand and wrap my head around. And she couldn't explain it. And she would just read the textbook to me and read it. Like even I went to extra help and it was just her and me. And she just reread verbatim what the textbook would say. And it was painful because there was no meaning behind it. And I think that there is, when you put intention into something, when there is knowledge, when there is wisdom, that when there is an awareness, there's something to be said for, like, we could say three words, but like the tonality and the intention in the words is like, someone says, I love you, right? Of course like I love you. Like when you're angry at someone, but you're like, I love you, you know? And then there's like, I love you, right? Think about the number of ways you can say, I love you. And to me, I treat at meditation was one about accessibility, one about attracting the people who really needed it, who think it's too hard. And they hopefully they would feel like it was a little bit to maybe like aggravate some of the lifetime meditators like me who are like, you can't cheat at meditation. And then they pick it up and they'd be like, actually, it's okay. It's not that. But why did you have to call it that? Like a little bit, I did want it to be something that was going to be a little catchy or sticky
Mhm.
from a marketing perspective, but also that I wanted to reach people who've never done this before, who think that they can't do it. I wanted to reach people who perhaps didn't want a religious form or
Mhm.
spiritual form of a meditation practice. I wanted to make it accessible to anyone, anywhere, so you could be your true self, so you could get back to yourself, so you could remember that your events, emotions, and thoughts are not actually who you are. They're just a
Right.
reminder that you are.
Excellent. And Farzana, what would you say how meditation can help with grief?
Well, if, if you do not feel it or acknowledge it, if you do not sit with it, it just stays with you. It stays with you, and over time it starts to harden. It's like it just starts to harden and solidify and become more and more and more intense. Sorry, just one second. um Welcome to COVID.
That's okay.
Working from home.
We are, I just want to wrap it up now. And I thought maybe you could take us through a very short, maybe guided meditation um, for anyone that's listening right now. And if you're following us, please make sure you're not driving a vehicle or you're not operating any machinery and you're in a safe space and you've got some quiet space. And I'll let Farzana finish off with a meditation.
Okay, so 5 rules or laws of meditation. 1, you are always doing it right. Okay, you cannot get it wrong. Whatever comes up, thoughts, emotions, itchiness, fidgety, get noticing distractions, people around you, that's okay. You're supposed to notice if someone's walking up behind you. That's what you have senses for. Just remember, Buddha always had, in the statues of the Buddha, the eyes are always a little bit open.
Oh, is that why?
I, I that's what came to me in a meditate and when I was practicing, was that the eyes were always a little bit open because it's awareness. It's not
Mm.
shutting down. It's awareness, right? Like you hear all those stories of pranksters who used to play jokes, and they say that that he was aware of them. He was aware that they were there, and always a little smirk, always like a little smile on the face, right? Like it's not so you are always doing it right. Okay. 2, thoughts are not the enemy. Your brain was built to have thoughts. Let them flow. Treat your thoughts like clouds in the sky. Okay. Treat like you are the sky, all the clouds, everything else is just the weather. Okay. Emotions are not fluffy things, they are chemicals. You have to honor them, you have to listen to them. Be a really respectful listener to your own emotions. The negative emotions have to happen. If you want to get out your insecurities and all of these other things and the grief especially, you need to feel those things out of you. Okay. It's like the beach. Every day you go to the beach, if the tide was out, if it was in, if it was stormy, if it was calm, it's still beautiful. So are you. Okay. And 4, be physically comfortable. Nobody said you had to sit in a lotus position on the floor. Okay. Just try to be upright so you don't fall asleep. And 5, you are always doing it right.
Okay.
Okay.
And
I
if
know,
you fall asleep, is that okay? Or
yeah, if you fall asleep, you probably really, really needed it. And sometimes people think that they fell asleep, but their body was actually just um, mimicking sleep from states of deep trance. Meditative trance, like meditation, when we go into those deeper brainwave levels,
right,
that's what we
right.
call trance, deeper brainwave levels. Um, Sometimes your body replicates sleep. So if you snore when you sleep, you'll probably snore when you meditate.
Cool. All right. I'm looking
So
forward to this.
I like to turn my hands to the sky just to be receptive to possibility, to openness, and you can rest them anywhere you want. I do recommend, if you're sitting in a chair, to uncross your legs and let your spine be as tall as is comfortable for you. All right. Take a moment. Just become aware of all of the sounds around you. Notice the sounds inside your home, inside the space near to you, and the space far from you. Perhaps you hear the sounds of cars, of other people, of traffic. The sounds of nature, sounds of walls creaking, the sound of my voice, the sound of your own voice in your mind, of your thoughts, of your emotions. Sound of your body as it breathes for you. Sound or vibration of your heart as it beats that breath, that oxygen, prana, life force, and chi from your lungs to your bloodstream, and with every beat, into every cell of your being, so that without any effort at all, life force is flowing into you, and whatever doesn't serve you flows out. Carbon dioxide, physical sensation, thoughts that don't belong, emotions that don't belong, that you may be processing without any effort at all. Sounds, events, thoughts, emotions, and awarenesses come and go. And whatever you notice, wherever you may journey to, perhaps on a daydream or a thought, always is your body breathing for you. Always is your heart beating for you. As you rest here, allowing yourself to be aware of whatever it is you are aware of. Slowly, gently, notice your body and the flow of your breath. Notice the sounds around you again, your emotions and how you feel in this moment, the activity in your mind. And notice the part of you that senses all of those things. Your awareness itself, your consciousness, the part of you that senses that you have a self, that you exist, that you are here in this time, in this space, in your body, taking the breath that you are taking in this very moment. And with all of your awareness, take the most beautiful, loving, deep, deep breath into yourself and just let it go. Take another loving, beautiful, deep, deep breath in. And sigh or you let it out. Let it go. Take one more beautiful, loving breath in. And release. Gently open your eyes, reach your hands up to the sky, look up and say, I feel wonderful.
I feel wonderful.
Okay, and so my question
And
to
I
you,
do.
Farhan,
Yes.
and everybody at home is, even if you had thoughts, I know we only did that for a minute or two, even if you had lots of thoughts and emotions come up, do you feel better now than when you started?
Yes, I absolutely do.
And I know you were, Farhan, minding the time and everything, but this is the
But
thing.
still, I could still stay in it. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you said, having your eyes just a little bit open to have that awareness. So I was definitely checked in, but I was, obviously had to look at the time. But
This is,
Farzana,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
we have to go.
We have to go. And I wish we could keep talking, but I can't thank you enough, my dear friend, for not just this hour, but your incredible friendship and your love. And, I hope that we can hug one day soon. And to all those listening right now, please check out Farzana. You can find her on all social media platforms. I will have her contact in the notes. And definitely, if you get a chance, do pick up her book, I Cheat at Meditation. It's available on Amazon, as well as her book, Pursuit 365. Farzana, that was great. I'm Farhan Dalla. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's episode of Elevate Your Life, a transformational podcast. I hope today's conversation has elevated you in some way and inspired you to connect, move, and meditate. I'd really appreciate your support by following and rating this podcast. Come back soon and join me for another transformative conversation.